there were 4 principles that I saw that were common to people that had spontaneous remissions from disease.
The way you think and the way you feel creates your state of being, and your state of being creates your life. Many people are stuck in situations that they would like to change. But we have subconscious beliefs that prevent us to realize our ideas. We have to change our beliefs. We have to change ourselves. Life always confirms who you are. Let's listen to Dr. Joe Dispenza, a neuroscientist who dedicated his life to explore the area of human brain and consciousness.
And the first one, of course, was that every single person that I interviewed absolutely knew and understood that there was an intelligence that was giving them life that they had to connect with, that they had to interact with and develop a two-way relationship with, that there is some unseen force, this power within us that's giving us life, and that they took time out of their busy day to begin to interact with it, to give it a plan and a template, and then open their heart and surrender it to a greater mind and ask it to resolve it in a way that was right for them. And they made it very important. Basically, they said, when my will matches your will, when my mind matches your mind, and when my love and appreciation for life matches your love and appreciation for life, you have to answer the call. And so these people were common people. They weren't nuns or monks or priests or rabbis. They weren't scholars. They weren't academics. Some of them were, but most of them were common people just like you and I. And the second thing they had in common is that they understood that it was their own mismanagement of their life and their energy that created their disease. That they were living the majority of their life in a state of pain, in a state of fear, in a state of hostility, in a state of anger. And it was those emotions from past experiences that they were still carrying around with them, and those emotions were driving certain thoughts. And those thoughts were reinforcing certain emotions, and those emotions were driving the same thoughts. And the way you think and the way you feel creates a state of being. And I say that thoughts are the language of the mind and the brain, and feelings are the language of your body. And how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. And so these people got caught up in the cycle of thinking and feeling in the same way for so long that it became their familiar state of being. And they said that they had to break the habit of being themselves. That the redundancy of that cycle of thinking and feeling and thinking over time conditions your body to memorize that state as well as your conscious mind. And whenever the body becomes the mind, that's called a habit. A habit is when your body is your mind. Now, 95% of who you are by the time you're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors and emotional reactions, beliefs and perceptions that function just like a subconscious computer program. So when people get about the business of change, and they're going to use 5% of their conscious mind to go against 95% of what they've memorized subconsciously, for the most part, the moment the person has a stray thought or reacts to something in their environment, they return back to the same self, and the program begins to run again. So if a habit is when the body becomes the mind, then to truly change then is to be greater than your body. To be greater than the emotional memories and addictions and habits and behaviors that keep us restrained to the same self. Now, what I learned from these people is that when we go from the old self to the new self, we have to cross this river of change. And the moment we no longer think the same way, or no longer act the same way, or no longer feel the same way, the moment we begin to become conscious of our unconscious self, that's the moment we step in the river of change. And the moment we step in that river of change, we no longer feel like ourselves any longer. And for most people, The moment you don't feel like yourself, your body, which has become the mind, sends a signal back to the brain to cause you to think equal to the way you've been feeling for the last 20 years. And so when we break that chemical continuity, the body as the mind wants us to return back to that familiar state of being. And if we listen to those thoughts as if they're true, those thoughts will always lead to the same choices. The same choices will always lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors will always create the same experiences, and the same experiences will create the same emotions, and those same emotions will drive the same feelings, and the person will say, "This feels right." But in fact, it just feels familiar. Now, when we go from the old self to the new self, there is a biological, neurological, chemical, genetic death of the old self. There is a biological withering, breakdown of the old self that's connected to a feeling. And when you begin to understand that crossing the river of change, you're not going to feel like yourself any longer, and the body is going to go through its own breaking of addictions emotionally, then the best way then to predict in this place, this void, this unknown, is to create a new self. And these people actually began to do something amazing. They began to reinvent a new self. That's the third thing they understood, that they had to begin to think differently. Now, we think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day. Out of those 60 to 70,000 thoughts that we think in one day, 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. So the same thoughts will always lead to the same choices, yes? Same choices will always create the same behaviors. The same behaviors will create the same experiences, and the same experiences will always create the same emotions, and those same emotions will drive the same thoughts, and that's called a personality. And your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So the present personality who's sitting here today has created their present personal reality called their life. Which means then, if you wanted to create a new personal reality, then you would have to start to think about what you've been thinking about, yes? And change it, yes? And you would have to begin to pay attention to those habits and behaviors and become conscious of them, yes? And then you would have to look at the emotions that you've memorized that keep you connected to the past and ask yourself, are these emotions loving to me? And so I realized that most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality, and it doesn't work. We literally have to become somebody else. So then you would have to agree with me then all this information that you're learning today would inspire new thoughts, yes? And new thoughts should lead to new choices, yes? And new choices should lead to new behaviors. And new behaviors should lead to new experiences. And then new experiences should create new emotions, yes? And new emotions should inspire new thoughts, and that's called evolution, yes? So then those emotions that Greg was talking about this morning, the majority of people in the Western world spend the majority of their life living by the hormones of stress. Now, stress is when your body's knocked out of homeostasis. The stress response is what your body innately does to return itself back to order. That's the first definition of resilience. Now, you have three types of stress. You have physical stress, like an injury, an accident, a fall, a trauma. You have chemical stress, like viruses and bacteria and blood sugar levels and heavy metals and hormones and foods and hangovers. And then you have emotional stress, right? Traffic jams and internet connections and second mortgages and single parenting and 401ks. And each one of those things knocks your brain and body out of balance. And all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. If the deer gets chased by a pack of coyotes, if the deer outruns the coyotes, 15 minutes later it goes back to grazing and the stress is over. Human beings are different. We can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. You can begin to think about some future worst-case scenario, and because the privilege of human beings is that we can make thought more real than anything else, we can focus on that possibility to the exclusion of everything else. And you can knock your body out of physiological balance just by thought alone, and your body, as the unconscious mind, believes it's in that experience in the present moment. And we can unfold past bitter memories that are tattooed in the recesses of our gray matter, and like magic we bring them to life, and in that moment it's real. And so the hormones of stress long-term push the genetic buttons that create disease, and no organism can tolerate living in emergency mode for extended periods of time. So then think about this. You can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. How many people have done that? You've done that? It's called being human, right? And we know that the hormones of stress dysregulate and downregulate genes to create disease. So that means then your thoughts can make you sick. So here's my question. If your thoughts can make you sick, can your thoughts make you well?
We often do things that are familiar to us. That's aligned with our beliefs. But that can bring the change. We need to start doing things that we didn't do before. The unknown should be welcome in our lives. We have to create, reinvent new selves. And when we start to think different thoughts, and when we start to feel different feelings, in time we will create a new self. And life will just confirm who you are. Not who you want to be, but who you are. Part 2 is coming in a few days, so don't miss it. Make sure you subscribe and leave your comment in the comment section. Have a great day.